You know what? Marcus said, his voice getting louder as his inhibitions completely dissolved. This is exactly what's wrong with society. Someone tries to be nice, tries to help, and everyone assumes the worst. I was offering food to a hungry person. Since when is that a crime? The boyfriend moved protectively in front of Jess, who was now recording the interaction on her phone. Marcus noticed the phone but, in his intoxicated state, he interpreted it as validation that this situation was important enough to document, not as evidence gathering. I'm calling the police if you don't leave right now, the boyfriend said firmly. Call them. Marcus declared, throwing his arms wide in a gesture that nearly made him lose his balance. Call them and tell them that a man offered a burrito to a sad woman. See what they say about that. I'll wait right here. To prove his point, Marcus sat down heavily on the bench and crossed his arms defiantly. The absurdity of his position, drunkenly challenging someone to involve law enforcement in a burrito-related dispute, was completely lost on him in the moment. Fine, the boyfriend said, pulling out his phone. I'm calling. Good, Marcus replied. And, while we're waiting, maybe your girlfriend can explain why accepting help from a stranger is so terrible. I was trying to make her night better. I had the best night I'd had in months, and I wanted to share that positive energy. Jess finally spoke up from behind her boyfriend. You made me uncomfortable. I told you I was fine multiple times, but you wouldn't listen. You sat down next to me without permission and kept trying to give me food I didn't want. Marcus stared at her, genuinely confused. In his alcohol-altered memory, their conversation had been friendly and mutually engaging. But, you talked to me, he protested. You answered my questions. If you didn't want to talk, why did you respond? Because I was afraid of what would happen if I ignored you completely, Jess said, her voice shaking slightly. You were obviously drunk, and I was alone. I was trying to be polite until my boyfriend got here. This revelation hit Marcus like a bucket of cold water. She had been afraid of him? Him? The idea was so foreign to his self-perception that he couldn't immediately process it. He was harmless. He was helpful. He was the kind of person who bought food for homeless people and worked late on Friday nights doing tax returns. Afraid, he repeated weakly. But, I was just being nice. Your version of nice felt threatening to me, Jess explained. A drunk stranger approaching a woman alone at midnight and refusing to leave when asked isn't nice. It's scary. Marcus looked around at the small crowd that had gathered to watch the drama unfold. Their faces reflected Jess's perspective, not his own. To them, he wasn't a good Samaritan having a breakthrough social experience. He was a drunk man who had bothered a woman and, then, argued with her boyfriend about it. The reality of the situation began penetrating his alcohol-clouded judgment. He wasn't the hero of this story. He was the problem. I didn't mean. He started, then stopped. The police sirens growing louder in the distance suggested that the situation was well beyond what his intentions had been. 2 police officers arrived within minutes. Marcus watched them approach with growing panic as his alcohol-fueled confidence evaporated entirely. Officer Martinez, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, took charge of the situation immediately. What's the problem here? She asked, looking between the 3 people and, obviously noting Marcus's intoxicated condition. This man has been harassing my girlfriend, the boyfriend explained calmly. She told him multiple times she didn't want to talk, but he wouldn't leave her alone. When I arrived, he became argumentative and refused to leave. Officer Martinez turned to Marcus, who was still sitting on the bench looking increasingly confused and frightened. Sir, what's your side of this? Marcus tried to stand up to address the officer properly but wobbled dangerously. The simple act of rising from the bench while intoxicated suddenly seemed monumentally difficult. I was just trying to help, he said, his words clearly slurred now. She looked sad, so I offered her a burrito. I bought burritos for homeless people because I felt good about myself tonight. I was trying to spread the good feelings around. Officer Martinez exchanged a look with her partner, Officer Chen. They had clearly dealt with similar situations before. Sir, do you understand that when a woman tells you she doesn't want to talk, the appropriate response is to leave her alone? Officer Martinez asked. Marcus nodded vigorously, then, immediately regretted the motion as it made his head spin. Yes, absolutely. But, she didn't say that exactly. She said she was fine, which isn't the same thing as not wanting to talk. She told you she was waiting for her boyfriend and didn't want a burrito, Officer Chen pointed out, consulting notes he'd taken while talking to Jess and her boyfriend. How did you interpret that as an invitation to continue the conversation? Marcus opened his mouth to explain, then closed it again. Under scrutiny from sober law enforcement officers, his alcohol logic was rapidly falling apart. What had seemed like natural social interaction at the time now sounded like exactly what everyone was saying it was: harassment. I think I misunderstood the situation, he admitted quietly. You think? Officer Martinez asked. Sir, have you been drinking tonight? Yes, Marcus said, abandoning any pretense of sobriety. Quite a bit, actually. More than usual. More than ever, really. Do you have someone who can come pick you up? Officer Chen asked. Because you're in no condition to get home safely on your own, and we can't have you approaching more people tonight. Marcus fumbled for his phone and scrolled through his contacts. The list was pathetically short: work colleagues, his dentist, his parents who lived across the country, and a pizza delivery place. The realization that he had no close friends to call in an emergency hit him almost as hard as the recognition that he'd been harassing a stranger. I could call my coworker Jake, he offered weakly. But, it's really late, and he's probably asleep. Call him, Officer Martinez instructed. Explain the situation and ask him to come get you. If he can't come, we'll have to take you to the station until you're sober enough to safely get yourself home. Marcus called Jake with trembling fingers, dreading the conversation. Jake answered on the fourth ring, groggy and confused. Marcus? What time is it? Are you okay? I'm sort of in trouble, Marcus said, acutely aware that everyone was listening to his side of the conversation. I'm with some police officers downtown. They want someone to come pick me up because I'm too drunk to get home safely. There was a long pause. Police officers? What did you do? Marcus looked at Jess and her boyfriend, at the officers, at the curious bystanders. How could he explain that he'd somehow turned offering food to a sad stranger into a police incident? I thought I was being helpful, but I was actually being inappropriate, he said, the words feeling strange and shameful in his mouth. I bothered someone who didn't want to be bothered. Jake sighed heavily. Where are you? I'll be there in 20 minutes. The officers agreed to wait with Marcus until Jake arrived, and Jess and her boyfriend were free to leave. Before getting in their car, Jess approached Marcus one more time. I hope you understand now, she said, not unkindly. Your intentions might have been good, but impact matters more than intention. When someone tells you they're fine, believe them. Marcus nodded miserably. I'm really sorry. I never meant to make you uncomfortable. I thought I was being friendly. I know, Jess said. But, maybe next time, consider that women alone at night have different safety concerns than you might realize. After they left, Marcus sat in mortified silence with the two officers. The alcohol was wearing off enough for him to fully comprehend how badly he'd misread the entire situation. What felt like the best night of his life had somehow turned into the most embarrassing one. When Jake arrived, he took one look at Marcus and shook his head. What happened to you? You were fine when I left you. I tried to help someone, Marcus said pathetically. But, I was drunk, so I helped wrong. Officer Martinez explained the situation to Jake while Marcus sat in the passenger seat of Jake's car, staring at his hands. He still had 3 burritos in his bag, the evidence of his good intentions that had gone so terribly astray. You know, Jake said as they drove toward Marcus's apartment, when people say alcohol lowers your inhibitions, they don't mean it necessarily makes you a better person. Sometimes it just makes you more of whatever you already are. What am I, then? Marcus asked. Jake considered this. You're a guy who wants to help but doesn't really know how to connect with people. Tonight the alcohol made you think you were better at connecting than you actually are. The next morning, Marcus woke up with more than just a hangover. He had a crushing sense of embarrassment that made him want to hide in his apartment forever. But he also had Jake's business card for a therapist who specialized in social anxiety, and a new understanding that good intentions without social awareness could cause real harm. 6 months later, Marcus would tell this story to his therapy group as an example of how he'd learned the difference between helping others and helping himself feel better about helping others. By then, he could even laugh about the absurdity of offering burritos to strangers as a solution to their problems. But, on that Saturday morning, hungover and humiliated, Marcus just ordered Chinese takeout and wondered how many other times in his life his attempts to be helpful had actually made other people uncomfortable. It was a sobering thought in more ways than one. "Excuse me," Marcus said, approaching the bench with what he believed was a warm, reassuring smile. "Are you okay? You look like you might need some help." The woman looked up, startled. She was probably in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and makeup that suggested she'd been crying. Her expression shifted from surprise to wariness as she took in Marcus's disheveled appearance and caught the smell of alcohol on his breath. "I'm fine," she said curtly, turning back to her phone. "Thank you." In his intoxicated state, Marcus completely missed the clear dismissal in her tone. Instead, he heard someone being polite despite obvious distress, and his alcohol-fueled empathy kicked into overdrive. "No, really," he insisted, sitting down on the bench beside her without invitation. "I can tell you're upset about something. I'm Marcus, by the way. I was just walking home and I noticed you looked sad." The woman scooted away from him slightly, her discomfort obvious to anyone in a normal state of mind. "I appreciate the concern, but I'm really fine. I'm just waiting for someone." Marcus nodded sagely, as if this explanation confirmed his suspicions rather than negated them. Waiting can be really stressful, especially late at night. "Are they late?" "That's the worst, when someone's supposed to pick you up and they don't show. Makes you feel abandoned, right?" "My boyfriend is coming to get me," she said more firmly. "He'll be here any minute." But Marcus was already reaching into his bag of burritos, his face lighting up with the solution to all her problems. "You know what helps when you're stressed? Food. I just bought these for homeless people, but you look like you could use one more than they do. When's the last time you ate? Stress makes people forget to eat." He pulled out a foil-wrapped burrito and held it toward her like a peace offering. The woman stared at it, then at him, with growing alarm. "Sir, I really don't want a burrito. I just want to wait for my boyfriend in peace." Marcus felt a wave of rejection that the alcohol transformed into determination. Clearly, this woman was too proud to accept help from a stranger. He recognized this trait because he suffered from it himself. What she needed was someone persistent enough to break through her defenses and show her that accepting kindness wasn't a sign of weakness. "I totally understand," he said, nodding vigorously. "You don't know me, so you're being careful." "That's smart. But, look, I'm obviously not dangerous. I'm an accountant. I was just at Murphy's pub with my co-workers. I can show you my business card if you want." He began fumbling through his wallet, pulling out receipts and credit cards in search of his business card. The woman watched this display with increasing anxiety, glancing around to see if anyone else was nearby. "Please," she said, standing up from the bench. "I really just want to be left alone." Marcus looked up from his wallet, confused and hurt. In his alcohol-clouded mind, her rejection felt personal and inexplicable. He was being nice, offering food, trying to help someone in distress. Why was she treating him like some kind of creep? "Did I do something wrong?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. "I'm sorry if I'm bothering you. I just thought you looked like you needed a friend." The woman pulled out her phone again, and Marcus noticed she was typing quickly. Probably texting her boyfriend about where to find her, he reasoned. Maybe warning him that there was a drunk guy bothering her, which seemed unfair given his good intentions. "Look," Marcus said, standing up as well and swaying slightly. I know how this looks. Random drunk guy approaches woman late at night. But, I'm not that kind of person. I'm actually really shy normally. I never talk to strangers. Tonight's like a breakthrough for me socially. Despite her obvious desire to end the conversation, something in his earnest tone made the woman pause. For a moment, she saw past the alcohol and inappropriate social boundaries to the lonely, awkward man underneath. That's nice, she said carefully. But, this isn't really the time or place for breakthroughs. You should probably head home. Marcus interpreted this as progress. She was engaging with him now, offering advice like a friend might. The alcohol convinced him that they were connecting despite her initial resistance. You're absolutely right, he agreed enthusiastically. I should be getting home. But, so should you. It's not safe for a woman to be sitting alone at midnight. Where do you live? Maybe we could share a rideshare. The woman's eyes widened. I'm not telling you where I live. No, Marcus said quickly, realizing how that sounded. I didn't mean it like that. I meant, like, general direction. I live in the Pearl District. If you're going anywhere near there, we could split the cost. Economic efficiency. He was proud of himself for thinking of a practical reason for his suggestion, but the woman was already backing away from him. My boyfriend is almost here, she said, looking at her phone. You really need to leave now. At that moment, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message. He pulled it out, squinting at the screen, and saw a message from Jake, "Get home safe, man. Thanks for finally coming out with us." The simple friendly message filled Marcus with warmth and reminded him of how good the evening had been before this awkward interaction. He wanted to share that feeling with this sad woman who was still refusing his kindness. My friend Jake just texted me, he announced, as if this information was relevant to their conversation. He's thanking me for going out tonight. I never go out. This is literally the first time in 6 months I've been to a bar. And, now look, I'm helping people, making connections. It's like the universe wanted this to happen. The woman was now actively looking down the street, clearly hoping to see her boyfriend's car. That's great. Really? But, you should probably call an Uber yourself. Marcus followed her gaze and saw headlights approaching. A dark sedan slowed down and pulled up to the curb. The woman immediately moved toward the car, and Marcus felt a pang of disappointment that their conversation was ending just as he felt they were making progress. Is that him? He asked, following her toward the car. Your boyfriend? The car door opened, and a large man in his 30s stepped out. He was at least 6 inches taller than Marcus and significantly more muscular. His expression as he took in the scene was not friendly. Everything okay here, Jess? The man asked, his eyes fixed on Marcus. This guy won't leave me alone, Jess said quickly, moving behind her boyfriend. I keep telling him I'm fine, but he keeps insisting on helping me with things I don't need help with. Marcus felt a surge of indignation. This was a complete misrepresentation of their interaction. He hadn't been bothering her, he'd been trying to be nice. The alcohol made his sense of injustice feel acute and urgent. Whoa, Marcus said, holding up his hands. That's not what happened at all. I was just being friendly. She looked upset, so I offered her a burrito. That's literally all I did. Offer food to someone who looked sad. The boyfriend looked between Marcus and Jess, clearly trying to assess the situation. Marcus took this as an opportunity to explain himself further. Look, man, Marcus said, swaying slightly as he gestured with the burrito still in his hand. I'm an accountant. I don't bother women. I was just trying to be a good Samaritan. Your girlfriend looked distressed, so I thought maybe she needed help. She told you she was fine multiple times, the boyfriend said evenly. But, you kept bothering her anyway. Marcus blinked in confusion. Had she told him she was fine multiple times? The details of their conversation were getting fuzzy, but he remembered her being polite and engaging. Surely this boyfriend was misunderstanding the situation. I think there's been a miscommunication here, Marcus said with the careful pronunciation of someone trying to hide their intoxication. I was just being nice. I bought these burritos for homeless people, and I thought your girlfriend might want one because she looked hungry. That's called compassion. The boyfriend stepped closer to Marcus, and Marcus suddenly realized that this situation had escalated beyond his control or understanding. He wasn't sure how offering food to a sad stranger had turned into a confrontation with her angry boyfriend, but the alcohol made it difficult to process what had gone wrong. You need to walk away now, the boyfriend said quietly. Jess was clearly uncomfortable, and you ignored that. That's not compassion. That's harassment. The word harassment hit Marcus like a slap. He wasn't a harasser. He was a quiet accountant who'd finally worked up the courage to be social and help people. The injustice of the accusation, amplified by alcohol, made him feel angry and misunderstood. That's completely unfair, Marcus protested, his voice rising. I was trying to help. I bought food for homeless people. I was being charitable. How is that harassment? Several passers-by had stopped to watch the confrontation, and Marcus became aware that he was now the center of a very different kind of attention than he'd enjoyed at the bar. But the alcohol made it impossible for him to simply apologize and leave. He felt compelled to defend his intentions and clear up what he saw as a fundamental misunderstanding about his character. This was exactly the moment when Marcus's good intentions, combined with too much alcohol and a complete lack of social awareness, were about to create consequences he couldn't have imagined. Marcus Thompson had always considered himself a reasonable man. At 32, he worked as an accountant for a mid-sized firm in downtown Portland, lived in a modest apartment, and rarely caused trouble for anyone. His biggest vice was perhaps staying up too late watching Netflix, and his most rebellious act in recent memory was jaywalking across 5th Street during lunch break. That Friday evening in September changed everything. The day had been particularly brutal. His boss, Mr. Hendricks, had dumped 3 emergency tax returns on his desk at 4:30, each one a nightmare of missing receipts and questionable deductions. By the time Marcus finally escaped the office, it was nearly 9 o'clock, and his usual Friday night plan of ordering Chinese takeout and binge-watching documentaries seemed painfully lonely. His co-worker Jake had been texting him all week about joining the office crew at Murphy's Pub for their weekly happy hour. Marcus had declined every invitation for the past 6 months, always citing work or fatigue. Tonight, however, something felt different. Maybe it was the stress. Maybe it was the realization that he couldn't remember the last time he'd had a real conversation with another human being outside of work, but Marcus found himself walking toward the familiar green awning of Murphy's instead of heading home. The pub buzzed with typical Friday night energy. Office workers still in their wrinkled button-downs mixed with college students and local residents. The smell of fried food and beer created a warm, inviting atmosphere that Marcus had forgotten he actually enjoyed. He spotted his co-workers immediately. Jake's booming laugh was unmistakable even over the crowd noise. Marcus! Jake nearly shouted when he saw him approaching. I can't believe it. Guys, look who decided to join the living. The group welcomed him with genuine enthusiasm. Sarah from HR bought him his first beer, a local IPA that tasted surprisingly good after his initial hesitation. Tom from the IT department regaled everyone with stories about the ridiculous tech support requests he'd received that week. Even quiet Linda from payroll seemed more animated than usual, sharing gossip about the office romance between 2 managers that everyone pretended not to notice. For the first time in months, Marcus felt himself relaxing. The beer helped, certainly, but more than that, he remembered why people enjoyed social gatherings. The conversation flowed easily, jumping from work complaints to weekend plans to random observations about the other pub patrons. Marcus found himself contributing more than he expected, even getting a few genuine laughs when he described Mr. Hendricks' latest micromanaging techniques. 1 beer became 2, then 3. Marcus rarely drank more than a single beer with dinner, and never on an empty stomach. The alcohol hit him harder than he anticipated, creating a pleasant buzzing sensation that made everything seem funnier and more interesting. When Jake suggested they order another round, Marcus didn't hesitate to agree. The 4th beer pushed him into uncharted territory. His usual careful filter between thoughts and words began dissolving. He found himself telling animated stories about his college days, embellishing details he'd forgotten he remembered. The group hung on his every word, and Marcus basked in the unfamiliar feeling of being the center of attention. By 10:30, most of his co-workers were preparing to leave. Sarah had an early morning yoga class, Tom needed to pick up his girlfriend from work, and Linda's babysitter had a curfew. Marcus felt a familiar pang of loneliness creeping back as the group began dispersing, but Jake clapped him on the shoulder. "Stay for one more," Jake suggested. "I'm buying. Consider it a celebration of you finally joining us." Marcus knew he should decline. He could feel the alcohol clouding his judgment, and he had a long walk home ahead of him. But the alternative was returning to his empty apartment, and the thought seemed unbearable after such an enjoyable evening. "One more," Marcus agreed, though his words came out slightly slurred. Jake ordered them both whiskey shots to accompany their final beers. Marcus had never been much of a whiskey drinker, but he didn't want to seem like a lightweight. The liquor burned going down, but it also amplified the confident, social feeling that had been building all evening. As the night wore on and the crowd thinned, Marcus found himself in increasingly animated conversation with Jake about everything from office politics to their shared love of science fiction novels. The alcohol had transformed him into a more extroverted version of himself, someone who told jokes and shared opinions without overthinking every word. Near midnight, Jake finally called it a night. He lived only a few blocks away and offered to share a rideshare with Marcus, but Marcus waved him off. The night air would do him good, he reasoned, and the walk would help clear his head. Besides, he felt better than he had in months. Walking alone through downtown Portland at midnight while significantly intoxicated proved to be a series of small challenges Marcus hadn't anticipated. The sidewalks seemed less stable than usual, and street signs required more concentration to read than he remembered. Still, he felt proud of himself for finally breaking out of his routine and having a genuinely good time. The route home took him through Pioneer Square, usually bustling during the day but eerily quiet at this hour. A few homeless individuals had settled in for the night, and Marcus felt a surge of sympathy and generosity that the alcohol amplified. He stopped at a late-night food cart and bought several breakfast burritos, intending to distribute them to anyone who looked hungry. This act of charity felt profoundly meaningful in his altered state. Marcus saw himself as a good Samaritan, someone making a positive difference in the world. The food cart owner, a tired-looking man named Rodriguez, seemed surprised by Marcus's enthusiasm but accepted the extra $20 tip with grateful confusion. Armed with his bag of burritos and feeling like a philanthropic superhero, Marcus continued his journey home. The alcohol had reached the stage where every small decision felt monumentally important, and every interaction seemed laden with deeper meaning than it actually possessed. As he walked past a 24-hour laundromat, Marcus noticed a woman about his age sitting on a bench outside, looking distressed. She was well-dressed but disheveled, holding a phone and occasionally wiping her eyes. In his altered state, Marcus's usual social anxiety was replaced by an overwhelming urge to help. This was his moment, he decided. Here was someone clearly in need, and he had the power to make her night better. The burritos were just the beginning. He could be the kind of person who helped strangers, who made meaningful connections, who lived life fully instead of hiding in his apartment every night. Marcus approached the woman with the confidence that only significant alcohol consumption could provide, completely unaware that his good intentions were about to create the most embarrassing and complicated situation of his entire life.